This was called the panel session, and it looks like a panel session. There are chairs, just like a panel session. Exhibit A. There is a slide up there that even has the word panel on it. My intention here is to actually not make it anything like a panel session, in the sense that you're going to get a bunch of people, most of which you've seen today, and you know, you've enjoyed some of their talks, and you're probably hoping they're going to get up here and preach the good word about the things we all agree on. What I would like is for the people who are going to come up today are actually going to disagree with each other. And what I would like is for them to have a little fight. So, I'm going to introduce this topic, and I have one slide to actually go through this. And so here is my theme for the intent. The intent is that that they should all, you know, even if they're on the fence, I prefer that they took the moment to just suck it up and disagree on something. Just really get out there and have a good time, you know, getting into a topic and disagreeing. So they may or may not truly believe that path, but for the sake of the entertainment factor and for the fact that we can have a good time. For the three of the four people who have spoken today, and Sarah is speaking tomorrow, so we'll introduce her. And like any good panel, I told you not to tell. I was hoping that we might have, you know, someone show their boobs, but that's inappropriate. All right, so if I could take a moment, actually, so I'll introduce myself and then we'll walk up the introduce. So who am I? I just want to spend the next 40 minutes just going through some of my projects. So a lot of people have done different things. I just did a lot of stuff, and it's good fun, and I love Ruby. I would never have done the stuff I've done if it wasn't for Ruby. So Jim mentioned that, the sheer velocity you can get on projects and the sheer interesting number. So that's me, and I am from Australia. That's where my accent comes from, and please don't suggest I come from like New Zealand or South Africa or somewhere just outside of London. They're all wrong. So if you could please put your hands together as the following four people come up. Joe, Evan, Wayne, and Sarah. You can take that. Really. Okay. Thank you very much, man. Thanks, sir. Could you? Whew. At this point, I should note that Evan actually works for me. Well, that was. You know, well, he did, and so there's an opening in the Rubinius team if you're interested, and someone to work with. Who was
hiring again?
No. All right, so we'll take just 2 minutes to start with Joe, and then through the queue, just for everyone to have a chance to introduce themselves, especially Sarah.
Yeah, you guys heard me earlier. Joe O'Brien from EdgeCase out of Columbus, Ohio.
I'm Sarah May, and I'm a software developer at Pivotal Labs in San Francisco. And I am not speaking tomorrow, actually. I spoke yesterday at the workshop. And the reason that you may not know me other than when I'm up here with these guys is that I spend most of my time for my open source work working on community development rather than code.
I'm Phoenix, recently unemployed. So if anyone has any openings, I'm available.
Wayne Seguin, the RVM guy.
Thank you very much, everyone. Now, you may have been aware that we asked you to put questions on the board, and the board is absolutely chock-blockers full of questions, and thank you very much for doing that. And for that, I apologise that we're not actually going to use any of them.
It's agile.
And we did an iteration, we did a spike, and you should feel confident that in a spike, you should just be able to throw it away and do something entirely different. So what we're going to do is each of the four people have actually picked something that they strongly believe in that's quite common for others to disagree with, something heretical. And this is part of my favourite part of the Ruby community, is that someone should be able to stand up and say, you know, you're all just getting on a bit too well, you're actually wrong. So, Joe, if you'd like to introduce your topic, and I apologise for the fact that the four of you are actually covering up half the slide.
Yeah, and being blinded. So my topic is the fact that what we need now in open source is not code contributions. I don't mean that in the documentation phase either. What we need are things that are very, very much not code related.
Yeah, carry. Sorry, I'm
Anybody
gonna fix the
disagree, or do you want me to
slides.
just keep going?
So, in the context of, I was not listening at all. Was anyone listening? Anyone want to going to pay attention? Firstly, does anyone here disagree with Joe?
No, more code, especially to RVM. Definitely.
Yeah, I disagree with them. I'm trying to get my mojo going here. Come on, how am I gonna?
Give it to Wayne.
We
Let
need,
Wayne. Sarah, do you disagree? Do you agree?
I think we need both.
All right,
Well,
let's
what do
start
we
with
need
Wayne.
more of then, Joe? Let me ask you this: what do we need more of?
I think what we need more of is people doing community events, people like Marty putting this together, yes. Yeah, anybody that manages to have a bar and a conference deserves a round of applause. What we need are simple pointers to things. Forget documentation, write a blog post, put up a quick screencast. Something like Vimcast is just started off as a small set of things. Yeah, he's got a soothing voice and all that stuff. But what we need are more people out there doing things that are in their strengths. Some projects, they actually need a project manager. They're pretty big. They could use somebody to glue some crap together for them. Who has those kind of skills that maybe doesn't have the coding skills to put something forward?
So in other words, close the patent office. Everything's been invented.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not that extreme. Code is going to keep coming in. Code is always going to keep coming in. There's people that are going to keep thinking of new things. There's people that are going to keep reinventing wheels that have been invented.
I take offense, quite frankly. I have 130 projects. You're suggesting I shouldn't have busted out the last.
I'm sorry. I didn't actually say Dr. Nick, but I meant it.
Well, hold on a minute. I mean,
No, so
that can't be right. I mean, if we get a project manager on some of these projects, like Rubinius, I mean, they're probably not going to have a clue of what needs to be done. So why would you ever want a project manager? You want software developers that have a clue what's going on.
Maybe you don't need a project manager, but you need somebody with project management skills to get things together. What are you guys doing in the next 4 releases? How much time do you spend doing non-code stuff in Rubinius? Honestly.
Yeah. Not very. I mean.
Up until now, of course.
Yeah. Previous to the reign of Dr. Nick, I don't know. Not maybe a few hours a week max.
Okay. Well, you guys are also one of the better run projects I've seen. There's also Max. Well, so maybe project management is not the greatest example, but what about recently last week we just did JRubyConf. Put together a conference for JRuby. One of the biggest problems JRuby has right now is not technical. I would say it's marketing. It's people understanding why they should use it, what they should use it for, how it can be used. It's people in the Java community knowing it's there. There's a ton of people using that stuff called Groovy. Please don't get that on yourselves. But JRuby's out there. It's working. It's great. Why people just don't know about it?
Well, okay, so you're going to take the most productive people on this thing, slap them in a conference for a week, and all that development time is now wasted.
No, the bomber peak, man. Remember that. At night, much gets done.
So how do the non-coding people even find their way into a project? I mean, GitHub just says fork, pull request. It's all code-centric. Right. Where do you even? Do we even make an effort? How do you even build a project such that those people
that's what the whole gist of my point is. People are going to keep coming with code. People are going to keep coming. They know how to do this. We keep talking about we need help. Let's stop getting the message out going, we need code contributions. Let's say we need other types of contributions. Help us talk about this. Come on the IRC channel. Come on a mailing list. Talk about it. What are we looking for? What do we need? Does something excite you? Tell 4 people.
So, like, donations?
Well, and I don't even mean in the financial sense. Jim and I did something called the Ruby Coins that we're really proud of. It's teaching people teaching people Ruby basics in a test-first approach. We built this for a conference. We put it on. It was really cool. And so we got our designer involved and built up a really nice site. And it looks pretty, so people want to come to it. We took a lot of time with our instructions on setup. That worked really well. But one of the things we tell people when we put on a session with the Ruby Cones is your job is open source contribution. You have two jobs here. It's not come and contribute code to us. It's number 1, give us feedback on how we did and what we're doing and how we're going about it. Now, number 2, tell more than one person about this. Spread the word.
All right, that's excellent. I appreciate that you've made the effort. Sorry.
I was going to say it's all about getting people that are not coders into open source development is all about personal connections. It's all about you reaching out to someone you know who's not a developer and being like, here, let me show you what I need and how you can contribute. And they're never going to come into IRC and ask you about it, right? I mean, you just have to be like, here's how you do this arcane thing that has to do with command lines and Git, and you've probably never even heard of Git. I mean, a lot of these people, it's the personal connection. So reach out to someone you know who's not a developer and try and get them involved.
So how do you argue with this exactly now?
So,
Next step.
I think I think it's a valid point. Like certainly I have 137 projects. If you could go and look after one of them, and if we all just made that a focus, just walk away and look after one of Dr. Nick's projects, I think that's a conference well attended. All right. Now, thank you very much, everyone, for that. Please put your hands together for that particular conversation. All right. Another stalwart of the Ruby community. In fact, one of the original things that people first thought about what Ruby could be good for was the following topic, and surely at this stage we should have this talk.
I think that the Ruby community has gone a little too far into the we need to test everything mantra side of things. And they're not spending nearly enough time on figuring out, say, oh, these tests are redundant. Let's refactor our tests. Let's get rid of tests. Or even just the minutia at which people are testing. So, oh, I've got a constant. Do I really need to check the test at that, those levels of things? So.
This from the guy who just created a version of the Ruby language test-driven.
I did not write the tests. I'd like to put that one forward.
So I would have to argue that what I heard was not you're testing too much, you're testing incorrectly. If you're not treating your tests as production code, you're testing incorrectly.
But if you have three times as many lines of tests than you have of actual production code, that seems like too much to me. That seems like what is being tested.
So now we're doing metrics? I thought we hated metrics. Lines of code? Are you serious?
I don't know. No. I'm just asking. I'm just saying, well, if I'm saying too much, I gotta put it in some. But I mean, I could do it in gallons. You want me to do it in gallons? Okay. If you have,
what's the metric of volume in Japan? Surely we should use that.
So.
Most people don't test at all. I'm just going to put that out there. You think that's too much?
So on average, what you're saying, on average, it's okay. Some people overtest, some people don't test, but it's average.
No. Hold on a minute. I mean, we've got an awesome community. All you got to do is throw it out there, and your users will find all the errors. You don't need to test. You just fix it when the users have the errors.
Actually, Sarah's got a great point. We see application after application come to us for rescue projects. Just recently, I had one particular one I counted. We had 90 models, and I can't remember how many controllers, and absolutely zero unit functional integration, cucumber, pickle, any kind of anything in testing. So no, we're not testing enough.
Can you test too much? Yes. Then? Okay, what is your definition for testing too much then?
View tests.
If everyone could just come back in an hour or two, Joe will be ready with his response.
I had a frickin' beer. Jesus, man. Give me a break.
It's inappropriate of us to be so expectant of him to just, come up with an answer.
Trying to make me coherent. I don't know what too much is, but what's enough? 1.5, 2.
I don't know.
So
16 gallons.
It's a feeling. I don't know how to answer that, honestly.
Well, Evan, what's your feeling of too much? I mean, you said that we do test too much. What's the...
Well, I mean, the idea...
Is there an example? Wayne, does your project have any tests?
Yeah, tell us about bash tests.
So I wrote this testing framework called BTU, Bash Test Unit, the Heat. And anyways.
Is it the sequel?
No, not the sequel.
Oh, the sequel isn't called the Heat?
No, that's more relational.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, yes, I started out the project. I had a lot of tests, and what happened was the features were evolving so fast because I was responding to user-driven development. Essentially, users would come into the channel, they'd have this particular issue. I implemented extremely fast turnaround time, and I'd make sure it worked for them. And this would usually break most of the tests. So the tests became an extreme drag on the project being able to make progress. So at some point, I just said, forget this. And I went for a long time without tests, and now that everything is pretty much stabilized, I've got all the features that I want to have in there now. I have some Blue Box Group, for example, already provided me with a testing server. Engine Yard is going to be providing with some servers for testing as well. And we're going to try to write some test suites to do complete integration tests of RVM. So I do believe in it. However, there is a time and place for it, and it is not always.
So would you rather have no tests or too many tests?
No tests.
Really?
So let me offer this as a corollary then. I don't think too many people treat their test suites like garbage. Like it's just it's a place for just the flotsam and jetsam of their project, and they may agonize and be like, oh, I spent all week refactoring this one class, and you go look at the tests, and the tests look like they vomited, right?
Right.
Like So in my opinion, if you have if you have 18 gallons worth of tests and only 1 gallon worth of code, I'm going to go so far as to say, we need to refactor some fucking tests, my friend.
Definitely. So I'll say, good Lord. So I would actually say that, again, you're testing wrong. I mean, my thought with we test too much is so what? It's a pendulum that can swing back and we can correct. But I would much rather have too many tests than not enough. And I would argue that red-green refactor applies more to your tests than it does to your code.
Now, I didn't make any suggestion either way of audience involvement at this juncture, but being agile, being cool, we have an opportunity here to make amendments. Ian is certainly one person who has some thoughts. Anyone else interested in partaking in this particular conversation? Please. All right, 1, Ian, 2.
There's one more thing I wanted to throw out there.
And Ty, come here so that you can,
Is it ever appropriate to chuck your test suite and rewrite it? And why?
I mean, I've rewritten a test suite before. I didn't delete it and rewrite it.
Well, I guess not me delete.
I didn't go from 100 to 0 and then back to 100. I mean, I've definitely set out to say okay, I'm going to write something that's going to break every single test, and I'm going to have to go through every single test in this whole thing and get it working again. I mean, I've certainly done that before.
Yeah, at some point, if you're inheriting a project that has a bunch of tests and they're mostly failing, they're mostly scaffolded crap anyway, just delete them and start over, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
how do you keep track of those tests? Which were just the scaffolding that you used to help build the app in the first place, and which ones were the actual important logic that you probably should remember 2 years from now?
Archive.
Archive proves
Just
business
run
logic.
Archive on it and see what's hitting what. I mean, yeah, you don't need the scaffolding stuff, but you need the ones that are hitting logic.
Well, I think Archive at this point has been demonstrated to not be as useful as people think for the fact it doesn't do the S expression. It doesn't track every different line of...
Right, but it's a first pass level. It's just a first pass showing what to come back to. Delete most of the scaffolded crap. Plus, you can see it a mile away.
Right. Yeah, but
Hopefully
no one
you've
does.
deleted
not do
tests,
that.
You've refactored tests. You've done, again, tests are production code. Treat them that way.
There's a microphone, and you didn't come down the front, so Tiger's first.
Let Tiger speak.
Sorry, do you want to...
I was going to say one more thing on this. There's also so testing too much doesn't just apply to say the number of it blocks or test methods, but what is actually being asserted in individual tests. So I've certainly, when writing Ruby spec things, sometimes we'll get tests, and the tests will be, every single line will be a should, but the only one that we gave a shit about was the last one. And we would just go through and just delete them all and tell them, look, none of those things are being tested in this test. Just assert the one thing that this thing is made to assert, so that the next time I come through here, I know what we were actually trying to do.
Well, but it's the messaging that's wrong, right? I mean, everyone says test all the time, but they don't tell you how to do it, right? What's obvious to you is not obvious to most people.
Don't tests often give you more comfort in things than you should have?
Again, we're not testing too much, we're testing wrong.
All right.
There you go.
Let's talk about testing. All right.
You're wrong!
Come on, Tiger, tell us how we're wrong.
Come and stand up, face everyone else, since they all know what you look like. Introduce yourself. And
I have to hold my own mic? Damn. So...
Somebody do it for you?
Excellent, thank you. I thought maybe I could...
What did he look like?
A tiger.
He had short brown hair and a beard and a mustache. So the question is, do you want too many tests? Or the question was, do you want too many tests or do you want no tests? Or maybe the right test. And I think that, so that's the question. You said you want no tests instead of too many tests?
Sure.
And I think realistically the answer is, if you have too many tests, you have the wrong test, right?
If you have too many tests, you have an easily solvable problem.
No, I don't.
How is that easy?
If you have, yeah.
Enter the ring!
If you have too many tests, it's actually a really hard problem to solve. Because how do you?
Ian McFarlane.
Thank you. Pivotal Labs, Ian McFarlane. You probably saw me on the
Manufacturer of the alcohol last night.
Yeah. You probably saw me on the beer tour. You may not remember.
He is pivotal to many things going on.
But having too many tests is really hard. Because again, this is the point. Like what the fill-in word here are you testing, right? Like, the tests have to be relevant. The tests are the most important code that you have because they're the ones that are expressing what your intent in the code is. So if you treat them like a place to dump behavior, like oh yeah, we wrote that test because we were bootstrapping this thing and you didn't delete it afterwards because, the requirements all changed, but we didn't change the test because, well, we didn't want to go back and do that. Archive is going to give you a little bit of insight into that, but Archive tells you, it doesn't tell you that you tested well. It tells you, like, okay, you have a bunch of stuff that you're... And I know you're not saying that.
I was not saying that, right.
Yeah, I mean, coverage is a great place to start if you know nothing about a code base.
Point. Right.
But it only tells you, order of magnitude, like, is there a chance in hell that this is going to work?
But what I'm saying is, given the code base I saw with all these models with a crap ton of logic and no tests, and given too many tests, I would rather start from the too many tests and refactor back. I'm not saying nothing should be done.
I would rather
but again,
start with
we're
too
not
many.
testing too much. We're testing incorrectly.
So,
Yes.
So on that point, let me give you. I'm gonna be contrarian with Wayne here for a moment.
Of course, sure.
Okay.
You can't be. This was your topic.
So if let's say that you get this rescue project that's got whatever.
Yeah.
16 gallons worth of models and
No gallons worth of tests.
no gallons worth of tests.
Right. Not even a pint.
Let's say that instead what had occurred was these people they're going to need a rescue project, so that's going to say something about the project in and of itself. We're told, hey, you guys need to be writing tests, and that's going to be a part of what's going to go on. You have to write tests. But they were never told how to write tests at all. So instead, you have probably 20 gallons worth of tests that are completely useless, that say nothing about, that assert nothing about the logic of what they expected or anything like that. Would you prefer that or the zero? Because to a certain extent, if you have 20
They're
gallons...
equivalent.
Yeah, you're going
But you're lost. Now you have to go and look through 20 gallons worth of tests to realize these are all bullshit.
So to me, I think it's irresponsible to say that we test too much and not say that, and not provide anybody the information as to how to test. I think everybody's agreed that that's really the message here.
Our biggest problem is education.
Absolutely. Which goes back to less code contributions.
Ooh. Well
Hey there,
played.
Tiger.
I owe you a beer. That was awesome.
All right. Last person is Jay.
Hi, Jay McGavin. I had to Google who to attribute, which is unfortunate because I've kind of been living by this. But the quote I've always heard is, add tests until fear turns into boredom. And that's attributed to Ron Jeffries.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much.
Well, way to wrap that up.
Oh, that needed.
do that again.
Yeah,
That looked painful.
Anyone see something they shouldn't have then?
I heard
All right.
a tear.
Please put your hands together for that particular discussion.
Circular logic reigns supreme.
All right, Wayne, give it to us. Developers should deploy.
The full Monty? Okay, so basically, yes, developers. You guys shouldn't be deploying. What the heck? You know, you're sitting there, oh, I've got Capistrano. Ha Cap deploy. Oh, happy, happy rainbows. Pink and purple and yellow and green. No, right? What happens if something goes wrong, right? You see there, you Cap deploy, it goes boom. All right, something you have to fundamentally understand what Capistrano's doing under the hood, right? Because if you don't know what the heck's going on under the hood, you can't fix it, right? Let's say you did some server upgrades or something like that, and it's all broken, and then you deploy, and it just manifests itself, okay?
Bring up a new instance.
So what I've seen happen is, okay, two examples. Two examples of this, all right? I've seen developers waste an entire week of time trying to get things working again before they called me in, where that entire week they could have spent writing productive code. Okay? That's where companies like Engine Yard and Blue Box Group come into play. All right? They relieve you from having to worry about that stuff because you can call them in and save yourself some pain, right? They're there for specialties. That's why you hire sysadmins when you have in-house jobs and you do that kind of stuff. They're going to take care of things when they go boom, right? Maybe they should be handling the deploys also.
Okay, I'm going to go for trying to tick off half the room probably, but I would argue that deployments are much easier now than they used to be because developers are deploying. Sysadmins tend to be the ones that will put up with a lot more dragging and dropping of files and moving things more manually. Developers will not put up with anything that they have to do more than once because we're much lazier than that. And so I think deployment is in a much better shape because developers are deploying.
That is true, but what happens when the bailout comes, when something blows up and they don't know how to fix it?
I think you're putting two things together that don't need to be together, right? I don't think developers should do system administration, generally speaking. However, deployment is different from system administration.
Is it?
It is.
In what manner?
System administration involves like understanding what your box is and all the dependencies and how things work together outside of the code that you're running, right?
What about release management? Who here actually goes through a process of figuring out what's going in a given release? Or who just, you know, as opposed to saying, whee, there goes some code. Splat. One. Release, so it's, you know, what, based on a branch, so just a branch doesn't go in? Or have you ever actually pulled something out and said, that's not going in this release? Oh, yeah. Yep. Sarah, you have?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever deployed anything from head. Why would I do that?
But who's in charge of making that decision? I mean, so far in this conversation we've talked about developers versus IT, but is there another process that companies...
So let me... Oh, go ahead. Do you want us to answer that? I was going to ask Wayne a question.
Sorry, before you start. Question. Are we talking about release management or are we talking about deploying? Those are two very different things.
Deploying.
I did add the release process on top of that, so if you don't want to talk about it, go for it.
The release process should be very overshadowed and oversighted by the developers. I mean, they're going to know what's going in the best and be able to inform the people actually responsible for the deploys.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So,
no.
If a sysadmin should be okay, let's say there's going to be a problem when I go to do a deploy. Okay, I'm a developer. Okay, and if you're saying that, oh no, I shouldn't do it, I should wait for the sysadmin. So the sysadmin is going to what? Do the deploy? It's going to blow up.
It's all about teamwork. You have to work together with them.
So no. So let's say they don't. Let's say that they're the ones who do the deploy. They're going to do the deploy. They're going to realize there's a bug or whatever. It's going to blow up, right? And so they're going to go fix it. Is that correct?
If it's a bug in the application code, they're going to roll it back and everything's going to be hunky-dory.
Okay.
If it's a bug on the server side, which I have seen happen often, they're going to fix it.
But isn't that the sysadmin's fuck up that there was a bug in the production system? So shouldn't the sysadmin be keeping the production system ready to be deployed to at any given moment?
Possibly, but sometimes there's processes in place where they can't really do that, or the infrastructure of the company is not there where they have like a full staging environment.
So shouldn't
resources.
So if it's all about communication, then shouldn't it just be if the deploy goes wrong, then there should be the sysadmin who you Skype with right away. Hey, it blew up. Here's the reason. Oh yeah, I forgot to install the new version of Postgres. Oh my gosh.
If there's teamwork and they're on it together, then I am totally for that.
See, in all these processes and stuff like this, I've seen through the years with sysadmins, they'll leave it in place. Developers will call bullshit on it faster than anybody I've ever seen. They won't put up with it.
I've known some very anal retentive sysadmins that blow the whistle really fast. I mean, one thing that they detect out of place and like they clench.
Right, but the culture of automation, the culture of, just automation doesn't seem to come as hard as it is. Yeah, they'll call bullshit, but they won't program a script to make sure it doesn't happen the next time.
I will give that to you that most sysadmins will not do that. They should. They should. If they're not, then they need to be spanked like the bad little monkeys that they are, and that's the end of that.
But is the reason they don't? Is the reason IT people don't write those scripts is because they're now too far removed from the code itself? Yes. Therefore, perhaps developers should deploy.
Yeah, they're not day-to-day developing. It's a much larger hurdle to clear. They don't see it as easy to just rip off a quick script. That's why having developers deploy is actually a damn good thing.
Well, and I've been on projects where we tried to do, where we tried to do Chef to set up servers, and a lot of times the system administrators were the ones that were the most against it. They didn't trust it. They don't understand how to write code. They don't understand how their processes are encoded, and they're probably afraid of being fired once the scripts are done.
All right, Jim.
What do you guys think about pairing developers with sysadmins for deployment?
Jim, I think you just gave me a nerd on.
Again? So a theme that I've been thinking about pair programming often is pairing differently abled people. And that's as closely as system administrators and developers, or blind people and yes, blind people and the other blind people, yes. Or,
So I think I would say no. I'm going to go with no on the pairing. Here's why. I'm going to go with Joe's point, which is that deployment should be so automated that it should be so seamless, because you should have already taken care of all the warts and all the weird stuff that would have occurred, that 99 times out of 1,000, it should go perfectly smoothly. And that one time that it doesn't go, that's because the sysadmin didn't do their job.
Right
Whatever.
now,
you guys got it.
All right,
Okay, so there's 1,000 gallons worth of deployment, and
damn gallons.
Surely it's a different.
Next thing you know, he's going to talk about a milkshake.
okay, there's 1,000 imperial tons of deployment, and
Josh is just about to leave, but since he's from Ops Code, he might have something to say.
I got a couple things to say. So the first thing on the pairing topic, hell yes. Pair your sysadmins with your developers, because you're not going to get shit done if you're not collaborating as a team. You're both there to enable the business. You're not there to be a cowboy and deploy. I'm going to deploy the code. Oh, it broke. I'll just hand it off to the sysadmin. He knows what to do. And sysadmin's like, your code, what the hell happened? The system's broke. No. And it's a finger-pointing match, and you don't get anything done. You're not adding any value to the business. So pair with sysadmins with developers, especially on code deployment. Second, on automating code, if you change your code, your application, like that ever happens, how many people have changed an application?
Never.
Introduced like new technology, new dependencies? Did the deployment break on the next time you tried to deploy? Hell yes. That's why sysadmins don't like to do changes, is because changes break the environment. And you got to test. You got to test all the time. You got to test too much, but you need to collaborate and make sure that everybody's on the same page and that you're working with the business rather than just, well, this is all automated, so it'll just magically work. Well, it doesn't always work that way.
Well, and to Tiger's point to what you're just saying, job title is not an excuse for a silo of knowledge.
Correct. And so the other thing is using Chef. Yes, Chef can help with deployment, and I firmly believe that developers should deploy, but they should do so in collaboration with sysadmins. And if you are responsible for deploying, you get to be on call too, because when the code breaks, you get to help fix it. Because the sysadmin in the middle of the night is like, I don't know how this stuff works.
Well, hopefully you're not deploying in the middle of the night.
Sometimes people are.
Most people do.
Anybody work in
Part of the world.
finance? Do you deploy in the middle of the day on a in the financial industry? No, because people are doing transactions in business.
Even in academia, we have a lot of management systems for academic software where I day job. And essentially, yeah, all the releases happen either super early in the morning or very late at night when nobody's on.
Yep.
Rolling deploys.
You're rolling what? That's at 420. It's all right. We already did the 420, remember?
My name is Rob Olson.
Hi, Rob.
Hey. What do you guys think about having a release engineer who is a developer but is specifically their job is to do deploys? I saw this in use at Twitter where they were doing deploys all the time and they just had someone dedicated to that job.
I have seen that work insanely well.
And I have seen it suck. It's going to depend on the organization. The job title is not going to mean anything to me. It's all about the knowledge there. I've seen projects work really well where you have, just like you would have a build monkey, you'd have this, the deploy monkey for that week. The nice thing about that, the deployment gets spread across from, the deployment knowledge gets spread across. But some organizations, Twitter, they've got that whole, scaling thing going on. Maybe a very different organization. It's going to depend on the organization as well. And again, don't let the job title make an excuse for not letting the knowledge be spread of what's going on. If one person is the only person you can page at 5:30 in the morning, something's seriously wrong.
I definitely agree with that. And the case that I'm speaking about where I saw it work really well, it was basically very experienced, very knowledgeable, and the knowledge was shared.
Yeah, knowledge
The
silos is what
communication
you're
is
trying to
key.
avoid, right? If you have one person and that one person is the only person who can deploy, that seems really bad.
That actually is bad, and I've had that experience many times.
All right.
I know.
Tony?
All right, hi, I'm Tony Arceri. So I'm in a bit of a weird situation, right? Like, we deploy apps on EC2, and we also deploy apps in France. And on EC2, right, we got fully automated Capistrano deployment. We taught our sysadmin how to use Capistrano. He's comfortable with it. So in that situation, like, it's cool. He can handle it, right? But in France, we got these J2EE people. They don't automate anything. We tried shipping them a WAR file of our application. And just over the past few days, it's been a huge clusterfuck of finger pointing. It's like, how did this get deleted from the database? How did the failover servers in our database config get deleted? Blah, blah, blah. And basically, we're at the point we just want to sort of fist, like, letting the developers deploy down their throat, So what do you make of that?
Honestly, that really sounds like a total communication failure.
Yeah, pretty much. It doesn't help there in France, right? Like,
So maybe there's a language barrier.
Dude, I don't care if it's France or down the hallway. Those are seriously organizational and communication issues, just like Wayne said. Those have nothing to do with deployment or developers.
But it will turn into fistfights between them. It's a self-feeding
But
feedback loop.
I think it's not even communication. I think it's something even harder to change, which is organizational culture. If the culture supports that kind of antagonistic relationship, which for that relationship to exist, it has to at some level, right? That's a big problem. That's a huge problem, and it's really hard to change.
yeah, I mean, I can say this is sort of like, we're dealing with very much sort of like a waterfall model type of company, and we're all agile. We want to do continuous deployment, that kind of thing. So there's definitely a cultural barrier in addition to a time barrier, geographic barrier.
I think that what you guys really need is what was stated earlier. You're trying to effect monumental changes, especially if it's a waterfall, so you need to iterate over that. Small steps, baby steps, right?
Also, it's not just J2E guys. It's our job to educate others as to what other resources are out there. So it's our responsibility as much as theirs. It's as much push as pull.
I mean, so what can we do more than, like, in our release notes, we give them the same set of instructions over and over again for how to deploy. And it's, a list of steps that we've fully automated ourselves. We can try to teach them how to use Ruby release tools.
This is probably a much larger topic than what we need to go into, but my short answer is somebody needs to stand on their desk. Somebody needs to get on an airplane.
Also,
Yeah, I would say fly everybody out to France for a week.
Woo! Everyone's coming to France?
I'm
Also,
serious.
instead
I'm
of
serious. It's about, these kind of relationships sometimes are
You're
allowed
going
to
to
develop.
France,
Hey,
and you're
yeah,
going to
that's right.
France, and you're going to France, and you're going to France.
France is a big place. Let's just get more specific. Somewhere nice or somewhere shitty? Because there's a lot of shitty places in France, and we don't go there.
instead of
Paris. Yeah.
Are we talking like?
No, he said Paris.
That's not very nice. All right, instead of it really sounds like you guys are trying to educate them as if they are of lesser intelligence and that kind of a thing. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but it almost seems like you need to involve them in the process, make them think that they're helping you automate things, kind of bring them in, make them feel like they're being a big part of the team instead of, we're going to show you guys how it's done kind of thing. I don't know if that made sense. But
I'm going to leave this as an interesting extension of the bigger problem of communication amongst not just...
Catch one of us later, definitely.
Yeah. And Cameron?
Hi there. My name's Cameron Pope, and I'm going to make a little bit of a bold claim that, from the moment that you could go on a command line and fire up a server instance and get root on it and shut it down via the command line, that all of a sudden this line between being a system administrator and a developer is getting fuzzier and fuzzier. And that in this kind of new world order, and a lot of things are shifting that way, pretty much everyone I work with is putting stuff in the cloud, that in this new world order, you have to have some knowledge of both. And you probably have to have somebody on your team that's super great sysadmin type of person, and maybe other people that are super great developers. But nowadays it's just kind of some basic skills as far as how to put a box together or script the process or edit scripts is a requirement.
I agree, and I think it's really unfortunate because I hate doing that stuff.
I don't have the luxury of doing this, but I have to think that, and you guys can correct me here, but are we getting to the point where, so if you're deploying on EC2, are people scripting down to the level now that they're like, all right, our deployment process is a script that runs here and it makes an AMI, and that's the level that they're at. Oh, and then we just boot that thing up at that level. So there's not even any sysadmin tasks that are going to be manipulated on the remote machine. You've essentially made the entire system locally, and then you said, all right, run this system here. That seems,
Well, and that goes back to Joe's point that development and operations are kind of converging, right? They had a whole conference on it, didn't they? DevOps, something or another. Yeah. And it's and so there's a lot more automation tools than there used to be, and they are converging. And yeah, you are going to have to know a little bit of both, but it means that the sysadmin side is more like development, which makes me happy.
All right, we'll wrap that up. So thank you very much for that particular All right, Sarah, you ready?
I'm ready.
Give it to us.
So I think that we need an experience.
Actually, can you just read out what it says?
I looked back. I looked back.
I think we need an experience, a native Ruby experience on Windows that is comparable to what other types of development operations are available in Windows. So we need something that's, doesn't make them install Seguin, doesn't make them install Git Bash, doesn't make them install a new Ubuntu image, but actually works on Windows.
It sounds really touchy-feely. What does it mean?
Are we talking? You said the word native, so it just made me wonder. Are we talking about Ruby to be for a development purpose, or like developing native Windows apps using Ruby?
Ruby for a developer. Yeah.
So here's, okay, I thought a lot about this. Yeah.
Rubinius is the answer.
So,
I'm interested in.
Okay. Are we looking? Okay. We're waiting. Windows developers like Visual Studio.
Not all.
Okay. No. So no, that's fine. But my point is that no matter if Ruby is not targeted to the sort of the blessed platform part, then it's always going to be stuck in the Windows developers who are ambitious enough to move out of that walled garden of Visual Studio.
Why can't we have a Visual Studio-like experience on Windows?
I don't know. They canceled it, as far as I can tell. But
they canceled Iron Ruby. That's different than the development environment.
Okay. So, I think...
Which is part of the reason I was asking the development, because it says Iron Ruby or not. We also tend, when it comes to Windows, we tend to say they. When it comes to Mac and Ubuntu and Linux, we tend to say us. Well, that's statistically correct. Why? Statistically correct. But, smart ass.
Yeah,
Jesus
but is
Christ.
it because of this?
Down in front. Is somebody Muslim? What's that?
Right, and my larger point is that it will be valuable to have those people in the community.
Evan, can you give us some fake metrics on the layout? The landscape.
Make out some numbers.
So what would lower the barrier to entry, would you think?
Well, here's going back to what we need is less code and more community involvement in people. What we need to go is get together and identify the fact that we have a serious problem with Windows right now and Ruby. We go through these waves where it's great and then it really sucks. For the longest time, we had the one-click Ruby installer that was built by, oh God, what was
Louis Levian?
No, before him. The dude that
before
worked,
him.
he worked at Boeing. Like he was, Kurt Hibbs, right. He wasn't even doing Ruby, but he just like felt the need to keep doing this. And it was great. But why can't we reach out and find other people that are still passionate about this? There are other people out there in the Windows community. There are people out there. They've got entire conferences, .NET conferences, places like this. I know I spoke at it trying to get them to come to Ruby. I told you it didn't work so well. But when they get to Ruby and they try to install it, the barrier of entry is so high, it's ridiculous.
But then we go and make tools like RVM, which then become popular.
On Mac.
Just excludes that entire ecosystem.
Okay, so here's
This one is your fault.
I don't disagree, but here's where the issue is, and this is the reason that Rubinius hasn't had Windows support, and we're working on it now, but that's kind of neither here nor there. But my point, I mean, it's fine for this, but here's my point. If there are Windows developers who want a native Ruby experience, then they need to start saying something. Because
Then we need to start looking down our noses at them.
No. I won't. That's fine. I totally agree. And I have officially stopped looking down my nose at them. But the problem is I can't find any to talk to about what they want. So that's why, for years, I have been saying, hey, whoever, if you want Rubinius on Windows, come talk to me. I'd love to get it going. And I got zero. I got just tumbleweeds for years. So
is that what noise they make?
I don't know. My sound effects generator's broken.
But so here's again where we can use other people's help and we can make a call out to say, help us figure this out. Maybe not figure out Windows problem, but figure out how to connect with somebody out there.
Oh, we know how to do that.
Networking is all about doing this. I watched Nick spend an entire weekend, this past weekend, everybody he talked to talking about the fact that he's like, look, our Windows experience sucks. What can we do about it? Who has some ideas? We're talking about JRuby at a JRuby conference. What can we do? Is there something here? Right?
So
actively, every single person he's talking to is a developer. He doesn't know if this person knows this. Now, I happen to have really close friends who are really high up at Microsoft in the evangelist community. Great, maybe I'll reach out to them. Maybe somebody out here has somebody that knows. Maybe there's some funding somewhere to be had. Maybe, and again, it doesn't have to be Microsoft, but you're saying stop looking at down our nose at them because we're actively pushing them out of the community. And number two, start trying to figure out how to solve the problem that might not involve code, but involves trying to connect people.
So here's where my stereotypes kick in, okay? You earlier had an example about using a project manager for projects. This is brilliant. Windows guys, they just respond so well to project managers. If we unloose project managers on all the Windows users, we'll get what we need.
Here we go. So let me pose question, the second part of this then. What is an example of a language that is not written by Microsoft that has a good development experience on Windows? I'm asking for emulation, right? So both active state, the active state Python, the active state Perl. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Delphi. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe so we have some
Java.
Yeah. So we okay.
Flash.
So we could work in Eclipse. I don't know. I'm looking at what the development environment for those languages are on those platforms. Okay. Or for those languages.
I said Python, and I'm kind of cheating a bit because I've got the whole Iron Python, which is actually right on the CLR.
Yeah.
So that's actively supported by by Microsoft as a company, right?
Sure.
That's cheating and kind of hitting below the belt.
Let's
But
go.
Active State in Perl was a fantastic example of that. The development experience of getting Perl up and running on a Windows box, because I was down in a Unix environment programming Perl, moved over to a laptop that was Windows for a new company, was up and running in no time flat.
Is
was
it
great.
just because it's
All
an
the libraries were
MSI?
there. What's that?
Because the installation portion is so simple. Because I can't imagine that. Did Active State Perl come with like a Visual Studio plugin to do all the Perl stuff, or is it just it put Perl as a binary on the machine?
Yeah.
You click this button, go here, type Perl.
Does anyone know the answer
works.
to this question? What is so special about active Python?
Yeah.
It's been years since I've done it, so I'm done talking about it now.
So anyway, that's
All right.
One question for you to clarify. You were saying that you need to make the development experience, developer experience on Windows better. Well, how is it different then? So what's different about developing on Mac and Linux that?
Well, let me just give you an example from the workshop that we did yesterday, which is that this was the first one that we did with Rails 3. So we redid the installation instructions that we have for Rails from the beginning, right? So we started using the new Ruby installer on Windows, and I went through it. I went through everything. I installed all the gems. Rails started up. It worked fine, except that every time I ran a rake command, I would get a pop-up that said, such and such DLL is not available. If you reinstall the application, which it didn't specify which application it was, that might fix this problem. And then you just had to click OK. And everything still worked once you clicked OK. But every time you ran a rake command, you got between 1 and 5 of these exact same pop-ups every single time. And this was repeatable.
All right. Question from the audience from Byron.
I actually don't really have a question. I kind of have a point. I mean, what you just said kind of highlights that if you're using Windows to do Ruby development, chances are you're using the wrong tool for the job.
We can change that.
Ruby doesn't have, or Windows doesn't have first-class support for Ruby. It's not that Ruby doesn't have first-class support for Windows. The command line tools that ship with Windows out of the box suck. That's why we need things like Seguin. So until the OS overcomes its shortcomings, it's going to be an uphill battle getting Ruby development on Windows.
Now I'm going to take this one. You're going to sit down! All right, no, okay, so essentially, I don't know how many of you know this, but...
Just say it.
Oh my God, it was horrible. So, there's this thing called PIK. There's this thing called PIK, and not P-I-K. It's by Vertiguous, I think, on GitHub, Gordon Thusfield, and what it is it's basically RVM for Windows. Now, it is not as robust. It's not as doesn't have all the features. However, Gordon is entirely willing to work towards making it API compatible with RVM. He wants to add the gem sets features. He wants to add all this stuff. He just needs help. So if you know any Windows developers who have a clue, please send them to him. We've had a couple people step up, and my friend Luis Leviana, he will help personally anybody who wants to take this task on. We can make an RVM for Windows. It's called PIK, okay? And the support is there. It just needs manpower. It needs more code.
So I would argue that that's actually kind of a naive, I can see the concept behind the thought, but I would recommend that's kind of a naive thought as to where we are. We feel like we're growing. We feel like we're a pretty damn big community. We are tiny. Our conferences are nothing. They're not opening receptions for speakers for some conferences for other technologies out there. We have a lot of room to grow. And we can beat on people that don't go out there and find a new job and change their job, that they don't like what they're doing. We can beat on people that aren't using a platform that they're happy with. But quite honestly, there's a lot of people out there. And I don't like sitting at 5% market share and trying to convince somebody to use Ruby, turning around, trying to hire somebody, and there's not a single soul around to hire, right? I want to find people that can come back into this community. I want them to see the joy that we felt when somebody showed us Ruby for the first time. So yes, we can sit there and say, you know, hey, Windows hasn't treated us fairly, so, you know, forget it. Realistically, we are still in the minority. I don't want us to be in the minority. We need to fix this problem.
Task force. We need a task force.
We need a task force, too. All right, hang on.
Ben Ferguson. I was at your workshop, Sarah, and thank you and the other Sarah for such a fine job. You already said one of the points I wanted to make was, I mean, the first thing that can be done is fix that DLL error. I mean, I would say 90% of the problems you had at the workshop were Windows related. And true. 2 years ago, I mean, I'm a beginner with Ruby. That was close.
You almost went there.
Yeah, but I like it. It's a very concise syntax. It's a lot of fun. But the reality is most of my clients are on the Windows side, and I, for other reasons too, I haven't gone there yet. I have background in Unix and so forth, so I'm not an Apple hater or a Unix hater. I think it's a fine operating system. But
Totally.
the reality is that right now, a huge majority of the market is Windows, and I do think it needs better support.
All right, it's important at this juncture for the naivety of some people to be brought to light. So we have some statistics here that are very interesting. So Instant Rails was certainly how I got started in Rails, 2005. And Ruby Installers is Luis's newest creation to make Ruby easier. So almost 5 million downloads. So I don't know what projects you've got.
I like how Active Record is down here with 157,000.
Right. Now, so I'm not sure whether these numbers are just whether they include the migration across to Ruby Gems. So it might not be worth comparing. But just okay, there's just childish people. Truly awful what I'm having to put up with here. As my peers. All right, so I think those numbers, if you're wondering whether or not we should care about this, who runs a consultancy, a hosting company, hires people, works with other developers? Okay, anyone else? All right, you need more people coming through the Windows community, because that's where they're going to come from. Okay.
I'm a recovering Windows developer, I guess. When I said the active state Python, 8 years ago, I came from Linux FreeBSD into Windows development. It was the Win32 library in Python I found could do things I could not do in Visual Studio. Now, I'm very disappointed once I started in Ruby to see Iron Ruby never caught on. It's gone away, whatever's happening with it. I'm thinking if I'm going to do anything there, I'll look at JRuby and what you do from JRuby and what you do from the Java runtime.
Yeah, I agree. I think at this point the best way if you're deploying on Windows is to go the JRuby in a traditional Java container route.
We tend to beat up on Microsoft for canceling Iron Ruby, but keep in mind the reason Iron Python is there and did so well is because it came from the community. Iron Python was done by a guy by the name of Jim Huguenin, who built it to prove that Windows sucks. There are a series of tests in Python that determine how fast your Python implementation runs, okay? And he was convinced that no matter how hard you tried, you could not make it run on Windows in any decent way. And he did it to prove this to him. Shockingly, it ran orders of magnitude faster when he started really messing with it. Next thing you know, Microsoft hired him. He's written what's called the DLR. It's an add-on to the CLR for dynamic languages, and it's taken off, and they've done really well. But it's the community that went around it that built it and got it moving inside. The Ruby community has actively looked down our nose upon Ruby, or upon Windows. Yeah, wow, we've got real issues. Look down at Windows, and therefore there's always this constant state of friction. And so, of course, Microsoft doesn't take us seriously. Other people in the community don't take us seriously because we're saying, use Ruby, it's great, but what you do sucks, right? They don't want to hear that message. It's all in the messaging and what we did. So the community got Iron Python to where it is, and the community's gotten Iron Ruby to where it is.
Jim?
Hi, I'm Jim Wyrick, and I have a question for the panel to consider. There's the issue of getting Ruby running on Windows. That's one thing. But my question is, how much of this problem is caused by developers who never test on Windows, whose libraries don't run on Windows, that have broken file paths? I know that in Rake, we worked really hard to get the system command to run consistently across all systems. And along with that, second part of that question is, what can we do as a community to make it easier for us developers who aren't native Windows developers to get and test it on Windows?
So now I'm supposed to purchase official Microsoft licenses to be able to test my
And that's that is an excellent point, because I mean, we've wondered this as
totally valid point.
But there are free tools available for Windows development.
Was OS X free? How much did you pay for your
So
your
every
Mac laptop?
every community around has a Microsoft evangelist. I've reached out to them several times because we've needed to compile something, we've needed to do something. Somebody has needed a copy of Windows because they're an open source developer and they're doing that. I've never once heard of somebody being turned down for Windows license.
That's good to know.
They will actually, they're out there supporting the community. Again, this is where we don't understand their community just as much as they don't understand ours.
So Microsoft actually has evangelists whose job is to deliver.
Do they distribute that over BitTorrent, or wow, what is that?
And I would like to point out at this point that the DLL things are not related to rake. It's related to loading the Rails environment. So other rake stuff works fine. Just loading the Rails development or the Rails environment is what causes that problem.
Okay, so maybe cost isn't an issue, but what about all that time I now have to invest to actually track these people down, get the licenses, etc.?
Well, no, perhaps we can. I mean, I personally will investigate that because I think it's interesting.
Well, okay, so when we were talking about active state, so a big part of active state, this is from 10 years ago when I used active state, was that they basically said, like, okay, this bit, we're going to draw a big circle around a whole bunch of dependencies, and we're going to make sure these all run great on Windows, and we're going to fix them if they don't, and then we're going to bundle and ship them out. So instead of having this sort of open-ended, like, does this library work on Windows or does it not? They instead just basically said, like, well, we'll just ship you basically this huge set of things that we know works fine. If you want to go outside that box, you're on your own, basically. So.
Who do you reckon, can you imagine building a business around something that has 5 million downloads? Surely, you know.
Well, and I would also like to point out that there's a lot of Ruby developers and Gem developers who just refuse on principle to make their stuff work on Windows. I think that's a problem as well.
Yeah, that's the bigger problem, I think.
Yep. All right.
The actual refusal to do it.
Refusal is tough.
I am part of the problem, not the solution. My name is Wayne.
Okay, last discussion from the audience.
Hi, I'm Dave Kapp, and I'm not as important as Jim Wyrick.
None of us are.
So I think one of the things, and this is coming straight out of Jim's talk earlier, but I think the lack of a coherent development set of tools available on Windows for Ruby is a big problem when you look at it from the perspective of a Windows developer. And Visual Studio was mentioned earlier, but another language that was incredibly successful and still is, although to a lesser extent, was Delphi. And I know that everybody laughs at when I mentioned Delphi earlier, but Delphi was something that was very visually oriented, and the entire package was wrapped up in a primarily visually development-oriented piece, and that was wildly successful. And I really do think that if Ruby had things that looked a bit more familiar to what an average Windows developer saw, and that could develop in a more traditional Windows workflow, that they would be a lot more successful with it.
And I don't think it has to be visual even. I mean, Rich Kilmer gave a great talk at the Golden Gate Ruby conference in which he sketched out what he thought would be a great sort of IDE for people who are more familiar with something like Delphi or something like Lotus Notes, right? And it doesn't have to be visual, but it just has to have more visual elements to it so that you can be in a model and you can automatically get to the controller and you can automatically get to the helper, you can automatically get to the tests. Like in RubyMine, even today, RubyMine is several years old, that doesn't reliably work, which is frustrating, right?
And as another, I believe this was mentioned quite a bit earlier, but some core pieces of Ruby functionality, as was mentioned, were never tested on Windows. I might have just had a random version of it which it wasn't working, but when I set up my desktop, which is Windows as opposed to my laptops and such, which are generally Macs, I couldn't even activate debug mode in Ruby because it said there were no native extensions available to even debug my code. So everything had to be print statements. And when functionality that basic to it doesn't even work, I don't think we can really expect anyone in Windows land to really care about the product.
So a really big problem that Luis has almost nearly conquered at this point, which is awesome, is the fact that there are so many C extensions in Ruby land, and a Windows development environment does not have a C compiler in the 99.9% case of the user, right? So, because it's not developers who want to use this. It's like, oh, I've got some application that I want to install that needs XYZ gem, and oh, now it needs a native extension. Oh, I'm screwed, right? So the workaround for this whole time has basically been to build and upload a gem that is pre-compiled for Windows. But Luis built a package called like DevKit, which is just an MSI that you install that comes with GCC, the proper GCC to do MingW development and all that stuff. And so that, and it integrates with an existing Ruby installation. So if you install Ruby installer and then you install DevKit, then you can install C extensions and they will be compiled and they can run on that machine and everything like. So we're sort of getting there to fix a lot of those kinds of problems. So.
Excellent. I think that, can I have a round of applause, please, for that particular conversation and everything we've talked about today. Just want to say thank you very much to Jim, Sarah, Evan, and Wayne, and hope you all have a pleasant dinner. There's what? You're going to come up? We'll have
come on up, Marty.
Let's get a round of applause for Marty for this thing. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. That was fun. I had mentioned in IRC that I was very happy that Dr. Nick checked my original idea.